Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the strangest contradictions in human history. A house of ice in the middle of the Persian desert. The sun has long set, but the ground still remembers the day. The sand is warm beneath your sandals like walking on the back of some slumbering beast. The stars are sharp and scattered across the velvet sky, and the silence stretches in all directions except for the occasional thump of your heartbeat and the whisper of wind tugging at your sleeves. You're walking alone, which sounds brave until you remember you're completely out of range for delivery plumbing or help. Welcome to Yazd, a desert city older than your calendar app. The air tastes dried, laced with ancient dust. And ahead of you, rising like a tan mirage in the moonlight, is the thing you came for. A mud brick dome sloped and seamless. Its top curves into the night like it's been sculpted by a giant's hand. No lights, no windows, just a heavy little wooden door, and the overwhelming sense that something inside does not belong here. And that's the truth. It shouldn't exist. But here it is, a yakshal. You probably won't survive this, at least not in that thin t-shirt and a bottle of tap water you swore was still cool. Out here where noon melts logic and lizards wear sunglasses, this place is more miracle than architecture. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love watching people drift off all over the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The yakshal looms larger the closer you get. Not threatening. Just certain. It has that look of a thing that's been standing too long to care what anyone thinks. Made from ancient materials, maintained by forgotten hands, and yet still standing. Your fingers brush the wall as you reach the door. The surface is rough and dry, but not fragile. You know that weird texture when you leave bread out too long? Multiply that by 1,000, add a little sand, and subtract anything that feels safe. That's what you're touching. You pull open the door, no lock. The kind of structure that doesn't need one. The air inside rushes out not in a dramatic swoosh, but in a subtle shift. Cooler, denser, like walking into the memory of winter. Inside the world feels different. The dome soars high above your head, made of curved adobe panels fitted together with absurd precision. The walls are thick, at least 2 meters of mud brick sand clay and a sprinkle of goat hair. Yes, goat hair. It binds the mixture into a waterproof, long-lasting surface called saruj, which sounds like a forgotten spell but works like 2,000-year-old concrete. You take a step inside, then another. It smells faintly of duststone and something sharp like metal that forgot its name. The floor slopes down toward a central pit, deep and dark. You peer over the edge and your breath catches. There's ice down there. Real ice. Glinting in the moonlight like silver scales resting in a hollowed-out cavity below ground. Maybe 2 or 3 feet thick. Maybe older than the sandwich you forgot in the fridge last week. You sit on a ledge, careful not to lean too far. The chill seeps up through the stone, not dramatic, but undeniable. You roll your shoulders, feeling the temperature difference tickle your spine. It's not air-conditioned, it's not magic, it's something stranger engineering. You tilt your head and spot narrow vents built into the structure, angled with absurd care. These are wind catchers or badgers, vertical shafts designed to trap wind, funnel it down, and create a gentle cycle of cooling airflow. Historians still argue whether these towers originated in Persia or Egypt. Some claim the Persians developed them as early as the 4th century BCE. Others say it's older than that, or maybe simultaneous invention like the world's slowest race to build a fridge. What's agreed on? They work, still, today. You close your eyes and listen. The breeze is almost too quiet to hear, but you feel it on your arms. Moving past you, down the pit, across the ice. Back up again. It's like being inside the lungs of the earth. You stretch out on a carved stone bench. The air gently laps at your skin. This is what refrigeration felt like before buttons. Before cords. Before beep meant anything. No hum. No flicker. Just cold earned and stored. You hear a creak. Something shifts above. A bat, probably. These domes are known for hosting them. Some people say it's bad luck. Others say the bats keep the mosquitoes out. You decide to pretend you're not afraid of either. As you lie there, you wonder who was the first to look at this sun-scorched place and say, let's store ice here. It doesn't make sense. But then again, survival rarely does, especially in the desert. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize something strange. You're not even cold, you're just content. You stay reclined on the stone bench a little longer, letting the coolness from the pit drift up and wrap around you like the thinnest blanket. It's not icy, not freezer cold, but compared to the night outside, it's enough to make you forget you're still surrounded by miles of sand. You get up slowly, joints protesting slightly, and stretch. There's a hushed echo in here. The dome's interior is curved not just for cooling, but for acoustics too, though that was probably a happy accident. Your steps barely make a sound as you move along the circular wall, tracing its surface with your fingertips. This is no ordinary dome. It's not random, it's intentional, and that's what makes it remarkable. The Persians didn't just throw together some mud and hope for the best. They understood the desert, studied it, and designed their architecture to outsmart it. You pause and look up. The top of the dome stretches far overhead, the interior narrowing into a perfect point, like the top of a soft-serve cone, but less delicious and more life-saving. That point isn't just decorative. It helps regulate airflow and balance heat distribution. And if you squint, you can see little air slits running along the sides. That's the old-school HVAC system doing its job. Historians still debate whether these domes were used for public storage or only for elite homes. Some say they served entire neighborhoods like community fridges. Others insist they were private, a kind of prestige symbol for wealthy families or temples. You're leaning toward the community theory. There's a quiet generosity in the way this structure is built. Now you notice the subtle slope of the interior floor. It's not flat. It dips ever so gently toward the center, guiding meltwater down and away from the precious ice supply. Below the ice pit, a drain lined with baked clay pipes channels the melt into a hidden underground reservoir. You wouldn't have spotted it unless you were looking for it. You're standing in the middle of a thermal masterpiece built from nothing but earth, air, and patience. And you're not alone. Your eyes adjust to a darker corner of the dome where something's been left behind. A wooden sled used to move the heavy ice blocks from the base of the pit up toward the door. It's small, worn, but the handles are smooth from use, and a bit of cloth is still tied around one side, maybe for grip, maybe for luck. You run your hand along the edge and imagine what it felt like to haul 20 kilos of ice up that steep ramp barefoot at sunrise. Better you than me. You circle back to the bench and sit again, letting the quiet settle. The silence here isn't empty. It hums with slow stories of ice carved before dawn of cold, saved for a future that always arrived too soon. You think about the outside world. A place that burns during the day, shimmers with heat mirages, and teaches people to value shade like currency. And then you think about this dome, stubborn and silent, pushing back. Your body starts to adjust. You pull your shawl tighter, not because it's cold exactly, but because it feels right. Like you're in a place that still remembers how to be cool when everything else forgets. There's a creak overhead again. The bat? Maybe. Or maybe the dome itself stretching slightly as the temperature drops. Mud brick breathes after all. It expands, contracts. It lives in its own very slow, very sleepy way. Outside, the stars continue their crawl. The desert never rushes. You shouldn't either. The dome invites you to stay longer, to slow down, to forget the hour. And so you do. You trace a tiny crack in the floor with your finger. It zigzags toward the pit, then stops. Maybe it's been there for centuries. Maybe it just formed yesterday. Cracks are like timelines here, meandering quiet, honest. You imagine a Persian child, sitting exactly where you are now, 100 generations ago. Maybe his father worked here. Maybe her mother ran the ice trade. Maybe they were just hiding from the sun like you. And maybe they were wondering the same thing. How does something as fleeting as ice survive in a place designed to erase it? You let that question hang in the air as the dome sighs around you. Somewhere behind the walls, wind passes through another bad gear, slipping in like a ghost swirling along the interior. The air doesn't rush, it glides. It moves in slow circles, and so do your thoughts. You lean back again, not quite ready to sleep, just ready to stop moving. You stare up at the dome's curve. No stars here, just that soft gradient of adobe tan shaped like 1,000 hands pressed it into place. And maybe they did. You stay seated a while longer, your back, leaning against the cool, curved wall of the dome. The stillness here is different. It isn't empty silence. It's engineered silence, the kind that feels earned. Like someone carefully designed this space not only to keep things cold, but to slow down time itself. Your fingers slide across the wall again, tracing the faint lines of the sarouge plaster, the ancient blend that keeps everything together. It's rough but resilient, like an old coat that's seen one too many winters. And then you remember this dome, this chill, this impossible little oasis is made from mud. Well, not just mud. More like mud with an agenda. You close your eyes and try to picture how it's made. First, someone gathers clay-rich soil, dry and stubborn, the kind you'd normally curse if you were trying to plant anything. Then comes the water. Not much, just enough to mix. And then a strange list of additives. Ash from burned reeds or straw. Sand for texture and structure. And yes, goat hair. Why goat hair? Because someone somewhere figured out that when you add it to clay and ash, the fibers help prevent cracking. It acts like natural rebar binding the walls so they don't crumble the first time a windstorm gets ideas. Historians still argue whether the recipe for sarouge was standardized across the empire, or if it varied from region to region. Some evidence suggests meticulous formulas passed down through scribes or architects. Others believe it was more intuitive, passed from father to son like sourdough starter, but with more ash and fewer carbs. You run your palm along the curve of the wall again. It's warm now from your touch. But underneath the coolness persists. The walls, often 2 meters thick, are the dome's true secret, not the ice pit, not the wind catchers. This material insulates. And not just temperature, it insulates intent. You picture the builders baking bricks in the sun, stacking them layer by layer in precise spirals. It probably took weeks, maybe months, and none of them had fans, electric mixers, or that one friend who always shows up late with iced coffee. This wasn't a weekend project. You walk slowly now, circling the dome. At certain spots, the wall subtly changes texture. A few bricks seem more weathered, perhaps replaced during a renovation centuries ago. There's a small ledge carved into one section. Half bench, half shelf. On it sits a jar, squat and rounded. Its lid is missing, but the shape is unmistakably designed to store something precious. Not ice, but maybe herbs, maybe yogurt, maybe just a lucky stone someone didn't want to lose. It's one of those little mysteries that history likes to leave lying around. You squat beside it and notice tiny inscriptions along the rim, just a few symbols, maybe ownership marks or blessings. They're worn almost to invisibility, but someone cared enough to mark it. That's all that really matters. Your fingers trail down to the floor, to the packed earth, smooth from centuries of footsteps. It curves inward ever so slightly, not just for aesthetics. It helps moisture move toward the center and down into the pit gravity, lending a hand in the daily war against evaporation. You remember a fun tidbit? In some regions, yakchals were even whitewashed on the outside to reflect sunlight during the brutal summers. Like putting sunscreen on a building. It's the little things, really. You rest your forehead briefly against the wall. It's cool to the touch. How is that even possible, you wonder, when it's nearly 90 degrees outside? It's because of science. And sand, and the stubbornness of people who refuse to accept that cold doesn't belong here. You smile. That's your favorite kind of history. There's a gentle scraping noise now. You look down. A tiny beetle is crawling across the floor like it owns the place. Maybe it does. It certainly seems more confident than you. The beetle disappears into a crack, and you feel that old familiar feeling like the dome is watching, listening. Not in a creepy way, in a quiet way. Like it remembers everyone who's ever stepped through that door, whether they came for work shade or just a place to sit and think. You stand stretch and let your gaze drift back to the top of the dome. That perfect curve. That perfect silence. And in your mind, you start counting the materials again. Earth, straw, ash, lime, sand, goat hair. The ingredients of something magical. Something mundane. Something enduring. And maybe in your own way, you're becoming part of that formula too. You move toward the center of the dome again this time with a little more purpose. Your sandals scrape softly against the packed earth, the curved walls guiding your steps like a compass needle to the pit. It's strange how something as ordinary as cold can feel so sacred here. You crouch near the edge of the opening, the central cavity that houses what shouldn't exist in a desert. A faint glimmer reflects from the bottom, just a sliver of ice stubbornly clinging to form, in a place that seems designed to melt everything. The pit is deep, wider than it looked at first glance. Lined with polished stone and clay sloped just enough to encourage meltwater to trickle down into an underground channel. One ancient Persian writer apparently claimed that the pit's lowest layer could keep water from freezing entirely, creating a layered effect colder and frozen solid. Historians still debate whether this was intentional engineering or just a fortunate side effect. The truth is, with ancient tech, those two things often blur together. You peer deeper into the pit and notice thin marks along the walls, scratched lines from sledges or ropes maybe. This was a working space, not a shrine, and someone long ago pulled a frozen block of water up that slippery slope while sweating through a wool tunic. You stand back up and exhale slowly. You've seen the result. Now you want to know how it got here. You push open the outer door, letting in a little more moonlight. Outside the dome, the air is warm again, like stepping into a slow oven. Not unbearable, but suddenly too much. To the left, you notice long, shallow stone channels arranged in tight, geometric rows. They stretch out like narrow pools, only there's no water in them. Not yet. This is where the ice is made. That's the part that really bends your brain. The Persians didn't just store ice, they created it. In the desert, without machines, without magic, without any of the buttons you'd normally press to make things colder. You walk carefully along the edge of the channels, their stone sides still cool from the night. During winter, workers would pour water into these trenches in the evening. By sunrise, thin sheets of ice would have formed, thanks to a mix of clear night skies, low humidity, and some sneaky thermal tricks. The key was radiative cooling, a process where heat escapes directly into the night sky. It's the kind of thing your high school physics teacher tried to explain, but now you're seeing it with your own two eyes. Here, under open skies and surrounded by silence, it makes perfect sense. You dip your hand into one of the empty channels. There's a fine dusting of sand inside, no big deal. It'll be swept out before the next batch of water gets poured in. And then you spot something. A smooth, rounded ceramic disc lodged near the corner of a trench. You pry it loose. It's surprisingly heavy for something that looks so plain. You flip it over. There's a faint engraving on the bottom, maybe a maker's mark. Or maybe it was just someone's favorite dish that cracked and got repurposed for ice duty. You set it gently aside and keep walking. The positioning of the channels wasn't random. They were aligned to maximize exposure to the night sky, minimize sun exposure during the day, and ensure airflow passed over them efficiently. If that sounds like a lot of planning, it was. You imagine the workers again, wrapped in thick shawls, their breath fogging in the air as they stepped around the pools. Waiting for the water to become ice. No fast forward, no shortcuts, just patience. And once the ice formed, it was carefully broken up, loaded onto wooden sledges, and pulled, probably with aching backs and loud grumbles, into the yakshal for storage. Every winter night was a quiet race against the sun. You crouch near the channel again and run your palm along the smooth lip of stone. It's pitted in places, but still solid, still good. These weren't ornamental features, they were practical, brilliant, and somehow elegant. You can't help but smile. This whole system feels like a kind of slow alchemy. Take water, add time stir with desert air, and end up with something precious. And unlike modern systems, there's no electricity involved. No noise, no waste. Just physics built by hand. You sit for a moment at the end of the trench, letting the desert wind whisper across your face. It's warmer here, sure, but in the distance, that mud dome still waits, still guards its cold heart like a secret no one's supposed to remember. Except you do. And tonight, under stars older than your ancestors, it still works. You sit a while longer beside the stone trench, letting your hand drift lazily through the dust. In the distance, the dome of the yakshal watches over the night like a patient camel, unbothered by your pacing and your awe. The breeze has shifted again, just slightly. It carries with it a faint dryness like parchment left too long in the sun. You rise and stretch your legs. From this angle, the trench system spreads out like a mosaic, geometric and deliberate. You imagine the workers returning at nightfall, pouring fresh water into the channels by torchlight eyes trained on the sky. They'd whisper to each other, maybe grumble a bit, but mostly they'd wait. That waiting was everything. Ice didn't happen in a rush. It happened in degrees. The desert might cook you alive by day, but at night, if the humidity was low and the air still the surface heat, would flee upward, radiating into the void. And in those precious hours, the water would begin to harden. Historians still argue whether the Persians truly understood radiative cooling, or whether they simply observed it and adapted. But whether by science or stubbornness, the method worked. You trace a small groove in the ground with your sandal. A faint channel, invisible unless the light catches it just right, leads away from the trenches toward a storage platform where sledges would have waited. You walk over to it. The stone here is smoother, worn by years of dragging wooden runners piled with newly formed ice. Some of it was cut into blocks, some kept as thin sheets to line storage containers. And all of it had to be moved quickly before the sun could undo everything. Imagine waking before dawn, again and again, for months. You lean against a low wall and close your eyes for a second. You can almost hear them, those workers muttering under their breath, huffing as they heaved the loads uphill toward the dome. The sound of rope creaking, ice cracking as it met warm air, the scrape of sandals, the hiss of cold evaporating on fingertips. You walk back toward the main structure. The door of the Yakshal is still slightly ajar, inviting you in like an old friend with excellent insulation. But just before you step inside, something catches your eye. To the left of the door set into the wall is a tiny niche, a hollow carved just deep enough to hold a container, maybe a small jug. You crouch to examine it. Inside is nothing but dust now, but there's a circular groove along the base suggesting this used to be a resting spot for something. Possibly rosewater, maybe mint syrup. Or even a bowl of sharbat, a sweet drink served ice cold during feasts or ceremonies. Not just because it tasted good, but because it was a show of status. Look at me. I have snow in summer. You stand again and finally step back into the dome. It's still cool inside, but now you can tell some of the chill is fading. The ice in the pit isn't gone, but it's melting just a little faster than usual. You glance up toward the vents. The breeze has slowed. It doesn't worry you. Not yet. But it's a reminder this whole system is a dance. Temperature, humidity, airflow. Everything has to cooperate. You walk around the pit one more time, your steps echoing in the perfect circle. And now something new enters your thoughts. Not the ice. Not the dome. But what happens next? Because once you've made the ice, once you've stored it, then you have to move it. And suddenly your attention shifts outward. Not just to the desert, but through it. Because what good is cold if it can't travel? The Persians didn't just master storage, they built a network. A quiet, creaking, ice-laden network of sledges, camels, and careful shade. You step back outside. The moon is higher now, the wind just a breath. You picture the traders' thick-bearded men with sunburnt faces loading ice into felt-lined baskets, wrapping them with straw, strapping them to camelbacks padded with woven wool, and then disappearing into the dunes, heading for distant markets, oases, and royal palaces. It sounds impossible, but it wasn't. Not entirely. If the routes were short enough, or if the caravans traveled by night, ice could survive the journey. And in places like Yazd or Kerman, that was all that mattered. Some accounts even suggest traders brought ice to royal courts dozens of kilometers away. And yes, some of it melted, but some of it made it. You let your eyes follow the horizon. If you squint, you can almost see them, shadowy figures moving under starlight bells, jingling faintly, baskets swaying gently with every camel step, carrying something impossibly fragile, carrying winter across the desert. You're still outside the Yakshal now, the dome casting a wide, gentle shadow beneath the full moon. You rub your palms together and exhale, half from the cooler air, half from imagining the effort it took to move ice like that. It's easy to forget how precious ice once was. Today, you nudge a freezer door with your elbow and complain when the ice maker jams. But back here in the dust and silence, every shard of ice was earned. You brush off your robe and head toward the market road, or what remains of it. Just a worn path really trampled by centuries of feet hooves and creaking wheels. It runs east toward the city's heart, and eventually beyond. Tonight you follow it as if you're a part of the crew. One of the traders, one of the haulers. In your mind it's still dark, perhaps just before dawn. You hear the soft clink of pottery, the muffled grunt of a camel shaking off sleep. You're handed a pack to tie down. Inside an ice block, maybe 12 kilograms resting in straw like a precious stone. It's wrapped in a felt thick and coarse, stitched by hand, probably patched a dozen times. You tie it tightly. The straps dig into your fingers and the wool smells like sun-dried goat. The others in the caravan check their packs too. Some of them wear turbans to shield their necks. One man is chewing something. Dates, maybe. He nods toward the east. Time to move. You walk alongside the animals, letting the sound of padded hooves fill the silence. The moonlight paints everything in silver blue, and the desert becomes a stage. Nothing moves quickly, but everything moves. The ice will make it to the city by mid-morning if you're lucky. Then it'll be portioned and sold. Some to wealthy households, some to public kitchens. A sliver maybe for the temple. You reach a bend in the road and pause beside an old cistern long dry. You imagine the caravan stopping here, letting the camels drink, while the men check their straps again. The ice is sweating by now. You wipe moisture from the felt wrap with a cloth, careful not to waste even a drop. By the time you reach the gates of the city, the sun is rising. A thin orange glow cuts across the sand. Time is now your enemy. You hurry to the shaded stalls where merchants are already setting out mint rose petals and glass flasks chilled with leftover shards. And there it is, the sharbat stand. You recognize it by the layered syrups in clay pots. Red for pomegranate, pale green for cucumber, yellow for saffron, and the white clinking cubes of precious ice floating like small miracles in shallow bowls. You place your load beside the stall and step back, rubbing your neck. One of the younger boys behind the stand grabs a chunk of ice with iron tongs, drops it into a pitcher, and pours rose water over it. The scent hits your nose, first floral sweet heady. A cup is pressed into your hand. You sip. Cold in a place that has no right to be cold. That was the point. This wasn't just about cooling drinks, it was about prestige. Control. Being able to command the seasons. In a desert world, ice was a kind of magic. A whisper that you, your family, your empire could bend nature, even just a little. Historians still discuss whether sharbat was a royal indulgence or a public treat. Records show both. But what's certain is this: everyone knew what it meant to hold a chilled cup in their hand. You sit now by the stand, listening to the quiet clatter of clay mugs. Children laugh nearby. One tries to chew a piece of ice and winces. The merchant chuckles and shakes his head. And somewhere in the background, a man counts coins, running his fingers across ice-earned silver. It's easy to forget that this cooling empire wasn't just built for luxury. It became an economy. Ice turned into goods, it moved people, created jobs, trained engineers, taught geometry, and somehow through all the heat and hardship it became normal. You close your eyes, cup still cold in your hand, and you think, somewhere right now, another caravan is loading up. Somewhere another dome breathes cool air. Somewhere another child is tasting ice for the first time. And none of them know your name, but they know your work. You lean back against a sun-warmed wall beside the sharbat stand, the stone still holding on to the morning's first heat. The air carries a syrupy fragrance, now rosewater and honey, a hint of crushed mint wafting from clay jars kept cool with melted ice. It's the smell of relief, of sweetness earned, sweetness. But your mind drifts away from the bustle of the market and toward the people who made this world possible. Not the vendors, not the buyers, but the dreamers, the builders, the ones who first said, "Let's trap cold where it doesn't belong." You rise, brush the dust from your clothes, and follow an alley leading away from the stalls. The noise fades. The morning light filters in slow stripes between adobe walls. And eventually you find him. Arctic son of no one you've heard of is fictional, entirely, but not impossible. He's exactly the kind of man who would have existed in a place like this. You find him standing on a wooden scaffold beside a half-finished yak shawl. His hands are covered in mud, his face streaked with lime. He's not tall, not impressive, but he has a particular squint, the kind of look you get from staring too long into the sun or thinking too hard about wind. "It's all wrong," he mutters. You look around. To you, it's just a big, dusty mound, a dome in progress. But Ardak sees mistakes. He sees the angle of a wall that isn't catching the wind right. A vent that's a finger width too wide. A curve that's not curving enough. You step onto the scaffold and sit beside him. He doesn't acknowledge you, but he doesn't ask you to leave either. "I told him the airflow had to spiral," he says. "Not just enter spiral?" You nod like you understand. He gestures toward the dome's peak. If the angle's wrong, the wind bounces. You get a hot pocket, then the melt rate increases. Then the whole thing turns into a tepid mud bowl. It's hard to argue with that. Historians still disagree over just how advanced ancient Persian architectural knowledge was. Some claim that builders like Ardak were guided by generations of trial and error. Others argue they had precise mathematical systems for calculating airflow, thermal mass, and solar orientation. Ardek would probably say, who cares, it has to work. You watch him pick up a handful of dried goat hair, mix it with mud, and slap it onto the wall with surgical frustration. He doesn't believe in shortcuts, doesn't care for praise. But he deeply, desperately wants the ice to last. Not because anyone told him to, but because he believes in cold the way some people believe in stars. Another worker passes by with a bucket of sarouge. Ardok stops him, scoops a bit with his fingers, sniffs it. Too wet, he mutters. The man groans, but Ardak hands the bucket back with the tiniest nod, like you can fix this. You sit quietly as the sun climbs higher. The dome's shadow begins to shrink. Ardak watches it like a sundial. He pulls out a scrap of papyrus from inside his robe, covered in hand-drawn spirals, arrows and calculations that look more like doodles than blueprints. But to him, they're gospel. At the edge of the paper is a sketch of a wind-catcher badger with notes on tapering and direction. His handwriting curves like vines. Hot air rises, he mutters. Cold sinks, but only if the vent's narrow enough to pull. You stare at the dome now taking shape in your mind like a giant puzzle with no box cover. Ardak's been working on this one for months. He's used 14 types of clay sourced from different wadis for their unique properties. He's bribed traders for the smoothest lime dust. He's rejected over 300 bricks, all for one goal: to create a dome that traps a winter's worth of ice until midsummer. He tells you without turning that the trick isn't making cold. It's protecting it from time. You nod. That part you understand. He stretches his back, finally glances at you. You don't talk much. You smile. He shrugs. That's fine. The cold doesn't either. He returns to his work, muttering about angles and ash content. You watch him, this dusty genius, sweating through his robe arms, elbow deep in mud, chasing the memory of snow, and you realize the world didn't change because of kings. It changed because of men like Ardok who refused to let the sun win. The sun is climbing now, more confident in its heat, pressing down on the adobe walls like a lazy tyrant. You step away from Ardak's scaffold, leaving him to his muttered geometry and sacred dirt. Your shadow stretches ahead of you as you make your way back toward the original Yakchal. The one you'd visited first, the one that still hums in your chest like a quiet drum. You duck back inside. The contrast in temperature is immediate, sharp, clean, almost polite. Like the dome is saying, "Ah, you're back. Took your time." The air inside feels heavier now, not in a bad way, just dense with stillness. You descend toward the pit, slowly your feet tracing familiar curves until you stop at the lowest ledge, the closest you've been to the ice itself. And tonight you've volunteered yourself for the midnight maintenance shift. Someone has to do it, not every day, maybe not even every week. But maintenance is the difference between cold and collapse. You kneel beside the pit. A bamboo broom bristles, stiff with salt, leans against the wall. You pick it up and begin sweeping the ledge around the ice, careful not to let any sand fall into the storage. Sweeping ice in the desert. You almost laugh. You don't. Not out loud. A small pot of plaster sits in a niche nearby next to a flat wooden spatula. One of the wall seams has started to crack. Nothing dramatic, but enough to warrant a repair. You scoop a bit of the cool, gritty mix and press it into the fissure. It sticks better than you'd expect. This stuff is built to last after all. Outside you hear a distant howl. Wind, probably. Or a jackal with opinions. You glance upward. A faint shaft of moonlight filters through the badger vents, catching tiny flecks of dust in midair. It's almost beautiful. Almost holy. But this is a job. You walk around the circumference, slowly checking for leaks, damp patches, changes in airflow. A good dome breathes. It exhales warm air and inhales the cool. If the cycle is disrupted, if the vents get blocked, or the breeze dies, then the temperature rises. The ice starts to sweat, then drip, then vanish. You pause beside the storage pit and listen. Drip. Pause. Drip. Not bad, just the natural breath of melting. But still, you kneel and adjust the clay drain slope. Just a nudge. Enough to guide the meltwater toward the underground reservoir. You imagine how many times someone before you has done this. 1,000, 10,000. Historians still argue about whether these duties were passed down within families, whether the role of ice guardian was formal ceremonial, or just whoever was willing to be up at midnight with a broom. You like the idea of a lineage. Someone teaching their child how to tell if the dome is holding too much heat, how to trace airflow with a ribbon. how to feel the temperature drop using only the back of their neck. You move on to the outer channel near the door where sand tends to collect and disrupt the entrance vent. You crouch, pull out a flat stone used to redirect airflow and brush away the buildup. The airflow is better almost immediately. You smile. It's not much, but it matters. There's something deeply satisfying about maintenance. Quiet work, low stakes. But if you don't do it, everything fails. You think of Ardak again obsessing over the angle of every curve, the texture of every brick. And here you are tracing his lines, protecting his design. Your eyes are heavier now. You sit against the wall, pulling your robe tighter. The cold from the ice pit rises slowly like fog that forgot how to float. You close your eyes. You dream not of anything grand, just simple things. A line of camels walking under moonlight. A cup of sharbat dripping with condensation. A quiet dome holding onto its breath. You wake with a start. It's still dark. Maybe an hour has passed, maybe less. A light rustling. You sit up, scan the dome. Nothing, just the sound of your own breathing echoing faintly in the curve of the ceiling. You stand and do one last sweep. Check the patch you fixed. It's drying nicely. You press your palm to it gently. It's already firming up. Satisfied, you place the broom back in its niche. Run your hand along the curve of the wall like you're saying goodnight to it. And then just as you reach the door, you turn around and whisper, "Still breathing." A soft breeze brushes past your cheek in reply. The door creaks quietly behind you as you step outside, leaving the sleeping chill of the Yakchal for the velvet hush of the desert night. You squint up. The stars haven't moved much, but the wind has. It carries a different scent now, something faintly metallic and distant. You pause. The road to the east is quiet, but not empty. Your feet carry you away from the dome on instinct, like your body knows something your mind hasn't quite caught up to. There's a hum beneath the breeze now, too steady to be wind, too low to be animals. And then you see it. Dust on the horizon. Not rising in flurries, but in slow, organized rhythm. Boots, hooves, armor. You duck behind a wall of stacked clay bricks, heart steady, breath shallow. You aren't a soldier. You aren't a guard. You're a caretaker of cold. But even you know what's coming. An army. A foreign one. And by the look of their helmets, it's not local. Bronze glints in moonlight. The shapes are too clean, the uniforms too rigid. You've seen drawings. Alexander's men. Historians still puzzle over how far his soldiers reached and how much they learned or took from the places they passed through. But one thing is certain, wherever Alexander went, his men looked for resources. And what's more valuable in a desert than water that refuses to be liquid? You stay low, ducking behind a patch of thorny brush. The thud of hooves passes just meters away. You hear a shout in Greek, half-muffled. Then the sound of something heavy being dropped. A grunt. A laugh. They're stopping. Your eyes flick toward the dome. It's in plain sight. No more than 200 meters from their campfire. You swallow hard. There's no lock, no guard, no defense. Just an ancient structure holding on to the last of winter like a secret. You creep closer. Not toward them. Toward the backside of the dome. There's a vent shaft there, low, narrow. If you wiggle in, you can be inside without using the main door. You slide through, scraping your elbow, but managing to slip inside. The air hits you cooler, heavier, safer. You blink in the dark, adjust to the silence. The ice pit glimmers below untouched, still breathing. You sit against the far wall and listen. Outside, the soldiers have kindled a fire. You hear the crackle. A few are laughing. One sings something off-key. And then footsteps, crunching slowly toward the dome. You hold your breath. A shadow crosses the slit of light near the main door. Someone's close. Maybe just curious, maybe looking for water. You reach into the nearest storage niche and wrap your fingers around a shard of ice-cold, clean perfect. It melts against your skin like a promise. A soft push. The door creaks again. Someone enters. A soldier from the sound of the boots. Heavy, hesitant. You stay silent, watch from behind the curve of the pit. He mutters something in Greek, steps farther in, sees the ice. Lets out a long, slow whistle. He kneels, pulls out a small dagger not to fight. Just to chip a piece free. He lifts it to his mouth, licks it, laughs. To him this is novelty, to you this is betrayal. He chips off another piece. Tucks it into a leather pouch, pauses, looks around, then leaves. You wait 5 more minutes. Then 10. Only when the fire outside dims and the wind begins to carry their laughter elsewhere do you finally exhale. They're not staying, just passing through. But even a single night is dangerous for something so fragile. You descend to the pit and run your hands along the surface. Still solid, still cold, still yours. You sit down beside it suddenly more exhausted than before. The idea that someone could steal cold harvest winter and walk away with it in a pouch that sticks in your mind. Because that's what this all is, isn't it? Not just preservation, but power. You remember stories. How kings once bragged about serving sorbet in summer. How foreign diplomats were given chilled drinks as a flex. How cold became currency. And how tonight it almost got stolen. You rest your head against the stone. The danger has passed, but the feeling remains. The dome is safe for now. But you understand now why our doc gets so worked up. Why every crack matters. Why the wind's direction keeps him awake at night. Because cold isn't just a temperature. It's resistance. It's memory. It's victory over the sun. You don't leave the dome right away. Not after what just happened. You sit by the pit a long while, watching the faint steam rise from your own skin as it meets the cool air. The ice doesn't say much, but it doesn't need to. It's still here. That's what matters. Eventually, when the wind outside feels calm again, you rise. Every muscle feels slower, like they've been tempered by the dome's quiet insistence on stillness. You step outside with care, half expecting a stray soldier to be lingering nearby, but there's only sand. Flattened tracks in the distance. A fading trail of Alexander's curiosity. But the dome won't forget. The desert welcomes you back with its usual embrace, warm, dry, a little smug. You pull your robe tighter around you and glance upward. The badge ears atop the structure shift slightly in the breeze, adjusting their whisper-quiet dance. You've heard about this happening before. Not invasions exactly, but heat waves, wind shifts, and dry spells that make the usual system fail. And when the wind disappears, even the strongest dome starts to sweat. You walk slowly around the yakshal, checking the vents. The breeze is there, but weak, hesitant, like it doesn't quite remember how to enter. You climb up the narrow stairwell carved into the side of the dome. Yes, there's a stairwell, hidden from the casual eye, probably added a century or two after the original build. Each step is rough and uneven, made more for maintenance than comfort. At the top, you step into the small service platform that surrounds the badgers. The view is stunning. Endless sand and scattered brush stretching across a landscape painted in early dawn. But your focus is on the vents and the air that isn't moving. You crouch beside the main opening. Normally, cool air would be sucked down into the dome as warm air rises out another shaft, a gentle convection loop. But today, the breeze is stubborn. You pull from your satchel a handful of clay tiles, roughly shaped, baked, slightly cracked at the edges. These aren't decorative, they're airflow baffles. Most people don't even know what they're looking at. But these flat chunks are used to shape wind. You learned that from Ardak, or maybe someone like him, before him, after him, or beside him in another time. You wedge one tile into the vent opening, angling it slightly inward. Another just beneath it. You hold your hand over the gap and wait. Nothing. Then a flutter, barely there, but it's enough. A whisper of air slides in and downward. The dome answers with a soft creak. You adjust the last tile gently, just enough to balance resistance and flow. It's like tuning a musical instrument no one else hears. And now, the vent breathes again. Historians still argue whether the Persians calculated airflow like this, or worked purely by feel. There are no surviving blueprints, no instruction manuals. Just domes that still work after 1,000 years. That's the only proof you need. You sit on the edge of the dome now, legs dangling, a slight breeze brushing your face. Below, the yakchal is silent and steady once more. The desert sun begins to rise, slowly peeling back the cool night. You feel it on your back, gentle for now, but full of threats. The temperature will rise. The sand will heat. But for now, you've bought the dome a little time. You imagine what happens during a long, windless stretch. 5 days. A week. The ice starts melting faster than it can be replenished. And then some midnight caretaker like you has to decide whether to ration the cold seal the pit tighter or pray for clouds. You think back to the records you've read, how during one such season, a team of workers spread woven reed mats soaked in water over the dome's surface to simulate evaporative cooling. Desperate, yes, but clever. And it worked. For a time. Everything here is temporary. But that's the whole point. The fight isn't about permanence, it's about persistence. You climb back down carefully. The stairs creak beneath your weight. One tile slips and falls behind you, clattering gently on the stone below. No crack, just a reminder. At the base, you pause by the entrance again. You look back at the structure not as a building, but as a living system. A creature that breathes air, sweats water, and shivers in the face of heat. It doesn't ask for much, just attention, just balance. You reach out and touch the dome's curved side one more time. Still breathing, you murmur. And it is. You don't head back to the village just yet. Instead, your feet carry you farther down the narrow path behind the dome, toward a cluster of small stone markers you hadn't noticed before. Low to the ground, half buried in sand, they barely register unless you're looking for them. You pause. There's something ceremonial here. You can feel it. You step carefully among the markers, the air around you growing quieter with every footstep. There's no wind here, not even the faint rustle of brush, just stillness. And then you hear it. Low voices, not threatening, not loud, more like chanting. You follow the sound over a small rise, your sandals catching on brittle roots, until you reach the edge of a fire circle. A ring of flat stones. A few low stools. And in the center, a Zoroastrian fire altar, the flame steady, unflickering despite the open air. Around it sit a handful of figures dressed in loose white robes, faces turned toward the light. Not speaking now, just breathing together. A shared rhythm. One of them turns, sees you, nods slightly. You nod back. No words exchanged, just silent permission to be here. You step closer and sit at the edge of the circle. The fire pops once lazily. Its glow plays across your hands, making your skin look older than it is, weathered golden, cracked like the bricks in the Yakchal's foundation. The others don't seem surprised to see you. Maybe you're not the first stranger to arrive at their circle in the middle of the night. Maybe they already know what you've come from, what you've been guarding. The fire isn't large. It doesn't need to be. It's the kind of flame that seems to sit deep within itself, burning inwards rather than out. It gives off heat, but more than that, it radiates balance. You feel it in your shoulders, in your breathing, in your heartbeat finally slowing again. One of the men, older, his hair white and his eyes more curious than stern, finally speaks. You've been with the ice. You blink, you nod. He gestures to the flame. Then you understand this. You're not sure what this is yet, but something tells you the explanation will come slowly, as all things do here. He holds out his hand. A small dish sits in it, metal with a tiny spoon resting in the center. Inside, a thick mixture slightly gray flecked with crushed herbs. You lean in. The scent is bitter, cold, sharp, ash and mint. He offers you the spoon. Taste. You do. The texture is powdery, the taste metallic, but the chill hits your tongue with a jolt. Not ice, not cold water. Something stranger. A powder that's been stored in clay for months, packed with crushed peppermint and cooled in the dome. You exhale. Your lips feel colder. Your mind feels sharper. It's called zamanyak, the man says. Time ice. You want to ask if it's medicine or ritual or both, but you don't. Because maybe it's enough to know that it's been made by people who understand both heat and cold, who live between opposites. The fire crackles again. One of the younger acolytes tosses in a bundle of dried Esfand wild rue. The seeds pop in the heat, releasing a scent that clings to the air like a prayer. This isn't just a fire for warmth. It's symbolic and eternal flame tended not just for light, but for order. In Zoroastrian belief, fire is not destruction. It is purity, and it must be kept clean, undisturbed. And when balanced against cold, well, then you have harmony. You sit back and feel it. One side of your body warmed by the flame, the other still holding the memory of the ice dome behind you. It feels like standing in two worlds at once. The old man speaks again. The sun always wins eventually, but we keep this flame for when it forgets why it rose. You're not entirely sure what he means, but then again, you don't have to be. Historians still debate how much interaction occurred between Zoroastrian rituals and the practical technologies of the time. Did the priests oversee the Yakchals? Or did the engineers simply build nearby, drawn to the same quiet rules of heat and balance? Some claim the domes themselves were sacred spaces designed not just to store ice, but to represent the cosmic dualities the Zoroastrians held dear, hot and cold, dark and light fire, and ash, death and preservation. You look back in the direction of the dome. You can't see it now, but you know it's there. You can feel it breathing. The acolytes begin humming. Low, resonant, steady. It isn't music. It isn't chanting. It's more like a shared vibration meant to echo between rib cages and stone. You close your eyes. For a moment, you think you hear the drip of melting ice, echoing in time with the rhythm of the fire. You open your eyes. The old man smiles. "It's good you were there tonight," he says. "It needed someone." You don't ask how he knows. You simply nod. You sit until the flame burns low. The others begin to move slowly, carefully, respectfully. Not putting the fire out, just tending it. Trimming it like a gardener might trim a tree that cannot die. You rise. Thank them with a quiet bow, and step once again into the desert dark. The cold on your skin has softened. The heat from the fire lingers. You feel balanced. You walk back toward the village now, guided not by torches or trail markers, but by the memory of warmth on one side of your face and cold on the other. The dome is far behind you, the fire even farther, but you carry both with you like twin breaths resting in your chest. The sand crunches beneath your steps loose now from the wind's earlier dance. The wind returns gentle, constant, and thankfully cooperative again. It snakes along your arms, curls under your collar, then flutters away as if checking your body temperature out of curiosity. You find yourself drifting toward the kitchens. The compound is quiet this late, but a few faint glows from clay lanterns tell you someone's still working. Of course. Kitchens don't sleep when the food must be cool, not just cooked. You slip past a low curtain made of woven reeds and duck inside. Immediately you're hit with a bouquet of smells: coriander pickled, turnip stewed lamb, and something sharp and sour that you can't quite place until you spot the earthen pots near the wall. Lids resting askew, each pot lined with soft linen, and placed carefully beside a long, shallow trough. And beneath that trough, ice. You blink. It's faint, but it's there, thin sheets packed under the pots cold enough to chill what's inside. You kneel beside the nearest one and lift the lid gently. Inside is mastokiar, a chilled yogurt dish mixed with cucumber-dried rose petal salt and a whisper of dill. It's thick, creamy, and cold enough to make the clay pot slick to the touch. You hear a soft laugh. A woman sits nearby on a mat, her knees pulled to her chest sleeves rolled up. She waves you over with a half smile and a head tilt that says, "Of course you're here." She doesn't ask who you are. This place has no need for introductions. You sit beside her. She hands you a grinding stone and a small bowl of herbs. "Zara likes it a little more sour," she murmurs, nodding toward the pot. You start grinding. There's something oddly meditative about crushing herbs at night. The way they release their scent at just the right pressure. The way the stone grates against itself with a sandy rhythm. The way the cold from the ice seeps upward, preserving the bite of the yogurt even now. Another woman joins you, tossing rose petals into a shallow tray. She plucks a few mint leaves from a string bag and hands them to the first. There's no speaking, really. Just gestures. A language made of glances and measured motions. This is how cold becomes communal. Not just ice for sorbet or drinks for nobles, but cold that settles into clay pots, preserving dairy through the hottest months. Letting spices rest. Letting sweetness linger. You dip a spoon into one of the finished bowls. The tang of the yogurt is bold but softened by the chill. The petals, though mostly decorative, add a perfumed sweetness. The cucumber still crisp. You don't even realize how hungry you are until the bowl is empty. "Always tastes better after midnight," the woman next to you mutters. She's braiding her hair now, lazily, the kind of habit one performs after the work is done. But before the body agrees to sleep, you help her tie the bowl shut again with a cloth and place it back in the cooling trough. They don't have a refrigerator here, but they don't need one. The women exchange small jars and spices, each labeled with smudged ink. Saffron, sumac, fenugreek. The jars are cool to the touch. Most have been stored along the outer shelf of the yakchal earlier that evening. They use the dome not just for ice, but as a cooling pantry. A rotating cycle of herbs, oils, and preserves, all kept within degrees of spoilage, but never crossing that line. You pause to take it in. This isn't survival, this is refinement. And somehow it's made entirely from mud, air, and sunlight. Well, sunlight avoided, to be specific. Historians still argue whether women were directly involved in dome design or just the beneficiaries of its cooling powers. But here you see clearly they don't just benefit. They master the cold, bending it into recipes, preservation, and midnight conversation. One girl picks up a flat plate of dried apricots, lays a cloth soaked in mint water over it, and rests it beside the trough. In the morning, it'll be cool, sweet, and softly perfumed, ready to accompany breakfast. Someone else begins churning yogurt, a smooth, steady rhythm, using a clay pot hung from a rope, swinging it gently back and forth like a sleepy child in a cradle. The motion is hypnotic. You sit back, letting the rhythm pull your eyelids down. It's not sleep exactly. It's something between presence and rest. A cool breeze snakes through the open door, brushing your arms. The herbs are crushed. The bowls are stored. The pots are sealed. The women speak only once more. Tomorrow, one says. Cooler than today, another replies. And somehow that's enough to make you smile. You rise slowly, knees cracking just a bit as you leave the cool kitchen behind. The mat beneath you has your shape etched into it now, your outline defined in a fine layer of flower dust and fennel seed. Someone waves lazily, eyes already half closed, and you nod back as the curtain flutters closed behind you. Outside, the night is finally beginning to give up. A faint grayness kisses the eastern horizon, and the stars look slightly bored, like they know they're about to be dismissed. You stretch your arms over your head and glance west, where the dome still sits in silhouette, serene and aloof, like an old scholar who's read everything twice. You walk toward the bazaar now. Not the morning version, noisy and crowded, but the in-between version, the one that lives just before dawn, where traders yawn more than they sell and everything smells like dust, cardamom, and sleep. You pass a man arranging dates on a tray, half asleep. Another is sorting bundles of dried herbs under a flickering oil lamp. You nod. He grunts. That's the full conversation. But you're not here for figs or tea. You're here for ice. Or more precisely, for what ice has become. You duck under a worn cloth awning and enter a small alcove that's part shop, part storage, part gambling den for very slow people. Inside, 5 or 6 traders are already deep in the ice price debate, a daily ritual conducted with all the drama of a courtroom and none of the urgency. A man in a red sash is weighing a block of ice wrapped in straw. Another waves his arms, complaining that yesterday's block was thinner than usual. A third is eating a fig and saying nothing at all, which somehow makes everyone more irritated. You step closer to the counter. The ice blocks are arranged on thick wooden slats, each wrapped in layers of felt and lined with salt-stuffed straw, an old trick to slow the melt. A few even bear stamped seals, indicating they came from specific domes, each one with its own reputation for purity, size, and melt rate. The seals are simple: a dot, a line, a crescent. You run your fingers over one, noticing the slight shimmer of mica flakes in the felt. That's not for function, it's for flair. Someone's showing off. The seller behind the counter eyes you. You looking to cool soup or impress a merchant? You smile, just learning. He grunts, then you can afford to listen for free. And so you do. The traders are discussing distribution routes, arguing over which caravans will leave before sunset, which one's already lost ice to a broken strap or a stubborn camel. One older man insists his pack stayed frozen 2 days longer than anyone else's. Another laughs and accuses him of planting salt chunks in the center of his blocks to fake the weight. You learn quickly ice isn't just a commodity here, it's a performance. And the margins are slim. 1 degree of heat, 1 extra hour in the sun, 1 careless seal, and the profit drips away. A boy enters carrying a small chest. He sets it down on the counter with a thud. Inside, wrapped in mint leaves, are 3 ice spheres the size of lemons. You blink. Spheres. They're not for cooling. They're for display. One trader whispers for the emir's tea ceremony. He likes to pretend the moon sent them. You chuckle. Historians still argue over the extent of the Persian ice economy, how widespread it was, whether it functioned year-round, whether it was tied directly to taxation or just localized trade. But standing here, you can feel its complexity. It's not just supply and demand, it's prestige, tradition, logistics, ego. And most of all, timing. One trader gestures toward a dome-shaped map carved into a wooden board. Tiny domes are marked by colored stones, each representing a specific yakchal. The red stones mean in melt. The green ones stable. The blue, full capacity. You watch as a younger apprentice adjusts a few stones. The red ones are growing. Hot wind last week, someone mutters. The man in the sash sighs. Might lose another batch before the caravan to Shiraz. He turns to you, half smiling. Want to buy your own dome? It's cheaper than marrying a date seller. Everyone laughs. You don't answer. You're too busy staring at the map, seeing how this strange cold economy functions in a world designed to undo it. Outside, the light has shifted. The first call to prayer cuts softly through the air. A rooster crows from someone's rooftop. A goat replies rudely. The traders begin packing their goods. The moment is fading. Soon, ice will be sold. Weighed, disputed, carried, lost. But right now, it's just waiting. You step back out into the open air. The bazaar is waking up in full. Now voices rising, sandals slapping cloth, rustling like sails in the wind. You look back at the trader's stall, now covered with wet straw and linen to keep the heat at bay for just a little longer. And you think in a world ruled by sun, they made cold valuable. Not just for kings, but for cooks, for medicine, for quiet mornings like this one. You walk on wondering what cold will cost tomorrow. The bazaar grows louder behind you as you drift away from the crowd, clutching a small folded cloth someone pressed into your hands before you left the trader's stall payment for your silence. Or maybe just a thank you for listening. Inside a sliver of wrapped ice and a sprig of mint. Not much, but in this world, it's practically currency. You head toward the outskirts of the village, following a thin line of footprints left behind in the dust. These prints don't lead to homes or markets. They lead to a dome, but not one like the others. This one is ruined. You come upon it at the edge of a salt flat where the ground crunches underfoot and the air tastes slightly bitter. The yakshal here leans unevenly, like it's been sleeping for too long. The dome is cracked. The walls are flaking. The door hangs slightly ajar, creaking with every soft gust of wind. You hesitate, then step inside. It's warmer in here. That's the first thing you notice. Not hot, but not cold either. Not like the others. The pit is still visible, but it's empty. Dusty. A few broken bricks have fallen into it over time. On one wall, a line of script remains half-chiseled, the rest faded to nothing. This place was a dome once, a proper one. Someone worked on this, maintained it, loved it maybe. But now it's just a shell. You step carefully, circling the pit, brushing your hand along the inside wall. At one point, this plaster would have been slick and cold. Now it crumbles a little under your touch, leaving a chalky residue on your palm. And that's when you hear it. Voices. Not angry, not hurried, just disagreeing. You peek outside and find two scholars crouched in the dust, gesturing toward the ruin. One wears a turban wrapped so many times it looks like a small library on his head. The other's robe is streaked with ink. They're deep in discussion. You stay hidden, just behind the dome's wall, not out of fear, but politeness. You listen. It's older than the ones in Yaz, the turbaned one insists. Look at the curvature. It's not just thermal, it's spiritual. The ink-stained man sighs. That's your reading. There's no inscription, no date. We don't even know who built it. Exactly, the first replies. It predates records, that's the point. Or the second says adjusting his satchel, it was just poorly maintained. They fall into silence for a moment. You imagine them mentally flipping through scrolls and folios, both silently rewriting their footnotes. Historians still argue over the origin of the yakshal. Was it first built in the Achaemenid period? Or did it emerge later under the Sassanids, perhaps? Some even suggest earlier prototypes existed during Median times, simple underground ice pits without domes. Others claim it wasn't Persian at all, but borrowed adapted from Egyptian cooling pits, or inspired by water catchment systems in Mesopotamia. But here's the secret, it doesn't matter who started it. What matters is that someone did. Someone looked at a desert and thought, what if we made winter stay? The scholars keep talking. The vents here are asymmetrical, the first says. See, no balance, that's why it failed. Or the wind shifted over time, the other counters. You can't engineer against centuries. They both sigh. The kind of sigh that says, we love this argument even if we never win it. Eventually they rise and wander toward a nearby campfire, continuing their debate over flatbread and lukewarm tea. You step back inside the dome. It's quieter now, not silent, just tired. This dome didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because no one protected it. No one patched the vents, no one sealed the cracks, no one adjusted the tiles when the wind changed. And that's what you realize kneeling by the empty pit. Cold isn't a gift, it's a negotiation. You trade time, labor, attention. You lose sleep. You listen to the wind like it's an oracle. You do math in the dust. You pray without words. And even then, you only get to keep it for a while. You brush a piece of broken plaster into your hand and slip it into your pouch beside the mint and ice. A reminder not of failure, but of effort. As you leave the dome, a breeze picks up behind you. It snakes through the broken vents. And for just a moment, you hear a sound like breath. Not cold. Not warm. Just the echo of something trying to start again. The broken dome fades behind you as you walk. The salt flats crunch beneath your feet. each step echoing with a kind of hollow finality like walking across the ribs of a long dead whale. The sky is pale now, no longer night, not quite day. You follow a winding path that weaves through scrub and stone, past the quiet fields where nothing grows unless someone begs it to. The desert is still sleeping or pretending to. Eventually you find yourself drawn back toward the main dome. The first one. The one that breathes. You step inside. It's cooler now than you expected. Somehow, despite the rising temperature outside, the dome has held its balance. The ice pit below glistens faintly, half in shadow, half bathed in a shaft of early light that cuts through the vent above like a quiet promise. You descend slowly, letting your hands drag along the curved wall, your fingers trailing over old patches and fresh ones. Each repair a conversation with time, and now for the first time you sit beside the ice without any task to complete. No broom, no tile, no intruders. Just you. And the sound of water remembering it once was solid. You reach into your satchel and pull out the shard of plaster you took from the broken dome. You set it on the stone beside you, not to compare, just to include. This moment doesn't belong to one dome, or one designer. It belongs to the entire idea that something as ridiculous as cold in a desert could exist if only you believed in it hard enough. You stretch out your legs, cross your arms, let your eyes rest. The dome hums softly around you, that endless low hush like wind moving through memory. You close your eyes. Not to sleep, but to listen deeper. And in that soft quiet we come now to the close. Wind down, 300 words. The dome fades slowly in your mind like a lantern burning low. You imagine the cool air wrapping gently around the remaining ice settling into the crevices, whispering across straw-lined bricks and ancient mortar. You picture the last drops of dew beating on clay pots, the echo of sandals retreating up a curved stair, the slow return of morning beyond the vent. Let the world soften now. No more heat, no more footsteps, just slow breath in and slow breath out. You picture the dome as if it's breathing too. A quiet rise, but a quiet fall. The breeze shifting gently. The dust outside settling like sleep over the desert. Out beyond the village, the salt flats glimmer like pale glass. Camels wait in the stillness. Traders stretch in the cool shade of tents. Women tuck rosewater jars into cloth. No one is in a hurry, not yet. And beneath it all, deep within clay and brick and darkness, the ice holds on. Just as it always has. Just as it always will. You feel the cold now, not as shock or sharpness, but as peace. A stillness, a kind of knowing. You've been inside the dome. You've swept its floor. You've listened to its breath. And now you carry a little of that cold with you. Not to keep forever, just long enough to fall asleep. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the wind pass. Let the dome seal behind you. And let the desert hold your dreams quietly. End of script. Sweet dreams. The dome doesn't speak. As you rise again, it just lets you go. Quietly, as if it always knew you were only visiting. You step out into the full light of morning now, and everything has changed. The sun is awake, stretching across the sand, like a creature that owns the world. Shadows shrink. The air is still gentle, but you can feel the day sharpening at its edges. And yet you don't sweat. There's still a coolness clinging to your clothes, to your skin, to your memory. You've been underground. You've been inside a space that rewrote what was possible. You follow a new path now, one you hadn't noticed before skimming the edges of the old irrigation ditch. Dry now, but once fed by melted ice routed from the Yakchal pit. In the distance you see them. Women. A group of them sitting in the shade of a windcatcher tower, not gossiping, not busying themselves, just present. Their hands work automatically snapping stems, tying herbs, brushing seeds from cloth. All while watching one of their own teach a girl how to cut linen into perfect squares. You approach slowly. They glance up. A few offer nods. That's enough. One of them gestures to a clay stool. You sit. The girl, maybe 9 or 10, is focused. She's folding a piece of linen into a tight square, then placing it into a small clay jar filled with vinegar and crushed fig bark. Her hands are steady, but her brow is furrowed. She's learning to keep the cold, one of the women murmurs. Not to make it, not to steal it, just to hold it. You nod because somehow that sentence makes perfect sense. The jars beside her are sealed with clay plugs. They'll be stored in the outer chambers of the Yakchal. The vinegar preserves. The linen holds the chill. Later, they'll be used to press against fevers to cool the skin or to wrap around jars of goat's milk. You watch the women work. They talk about the wind like it's a neighbor. Whether it's turned too dry, whether it smells of salt today. They talk about the vents, about how one is whistling more than usual. They talk about how Ardak is refusing to rest again, which elicits a chorus of sighs. These women know the dome as well as anyone. Maybe better. One of them plucks a mint leaf from her pouch and presses it to your wrist. Feel it, she says. Still cool. And it is. Cooler than the air. Despite the sun, despite everything. Historians still argue how involved women were in Persian engineering projects, whether they designed, directed, or simply maintained. But sitting here watching these women pass down tricks and textures like songs, you realize something. They are the engineers of practice. They don't build domes. They build systems quiet, invisible, essential. They know how to seal a jar so the cold won't run away. How to wrap an infant's cloth to keep it dry for longer. How to press a wet pebble to a baby's lips so they don't cry in the heat. One of the women dips her fingers into a bowl of sandalwood paste and paints a quick line on her collarbone. You catch a whiff-cool floral grounding. Another practical trick. They're not storing ice. They're storing relief. You sit with them until the jars are sealed, the mint is dried, and the girl has learned how to fold the linen into the smallest, neatest square of all. She holds it up to her forehead, closes her eyes, and smiles. You smile too, because now you're starting to understand this wasn't just about surviving heat. It was about meeting it on equal terms with calm hands, quiet rituals, and the kind of knowledge that lives not in books, but in wrists and breath and the folds of linen. You linger a little while longer with the women, though the morning is now fully awake and beginning to demand things. The girl has run off chasing a dust-colored cat around a row of fig trees that lean like old men in the sun. The mint has been bundled. The jars have been carried away in reed baskets. The moment has folded itself up neatly like the linens they tucked into their pouches. You thank them with a silent hand to your heart, and they return the gesture not as farewell, but as if to say you're part of this now. You walk away slowly thinking about everything that's been preserved ice milk memory mint time. And then, just as your thoughts begin to drift, something catches your eye. Footprints. Fresh ones, barefoot, narrow, quick. You follow them without thinking. It feels like a whisper tugging your sleeve. The prints lead toward a narrow inlet between two hills, an old footpath carved by repetition, not intention. The wind here is quieter, and the air somehow wetter. At the end of the path lies a second dome, but this one's not whole. It's low to the ground, covered in brush, the entrance half collapsed and sealed with broken pottery shards. But the footprints go straight to it. And there's something else, a faint puddle near the threshold. Not large, not deep, but unmistakably water, and it didn't come from the sky. You crouch. The water's cool to the touch, clean. Someone's been here. Not just passing through, but using this forgotten space. You push gently on the doorway, and it gives way just enough to slide inside sideways. It's darker here, more cramped, but immediately you feel it a chill. Not as deep or strong as the main yakshal, but definite. The pit inside is smaller, but there's still a bit of ice at the bottom, cloaked in wet straw and linen scraps. There's a small clay cup left on the ledge, still damp inside, and nearby a hand-scrawled bundle of notes bound with hemp string. You hesitate, then gently untie it. Inside, rows of observations, weather patterns, notes on airflow, drawings of vent angles, ice thickness, and an unfamiliar script that looks more poetic than technical. It's not Ardak's hand, it's too loose, too curious. And then you find the sketch, a rough drawing of a barefoot person. Thin hair cropped short, balancing a bundle of cloth on their head, and a clay jug in one hand. Underneath a line in Persian, "What melts returns." What returns is worth keeping. You sit with that for a moment. Someone's been stealing ice. But not for profit, not out of malice. They've been studying, preserving, maybe even protecting a secondary store in case the main dome ever fails. Historians still argue over whether backup domes existed, smaller off-grid structures built in secrecy or owned by families. There's little physical evidence, but this could be it. Not official, not grand, just practical. You look around the tight space. There's a small ventilation slit angled with surprising accuracy. The floor has been tamped down into a gentle basin, and a low shelf has been carved into the wall holding jars of what smells like pickled lemon rind and salted apricots. You're not angry, you're impressed. You smile. Because someone has been continuing the work in their own quiet way outside the formal systems. A student of cold, a keeper of chill. You gently place the notebook back where you found it. You take nothing, leave everything as it was. Except for a tiny stone from your pocket, you place it beside the cup. A small offering of thanks. And then you step back out into the sun again. The footprints are already starting to fade. The puddle is evaporating, but the dome remains, breathing its cold into a world that still doesn't expect it. You dust off your robe and walk away. Back toward the village, toward the market, toward the dome that everyone knows. But you'll always remember this one. The hidden yakchal where someone else loved ice enough to keep it alive. Quietly. The sun has officially taken over now, unapologetic, relentless humming, like a giant brass kettle hanging just overhead. You feel it on your neck as you walk, the heat coiling around your shoulders, reminding you why the ice matters so much. You take a long path back toward the main village, skirting the edge of a stone wall, half swallowed by brush. A few children dash by barefoot and giggling, chasing a rolling clay bowl that probably wasn't meant to be rolled. You let the laughter pass soft as wind chimes, then turn east toward the dome again. But you don't reach it. Instead, you pause at something new, or old, depending on how you look at it. At first, it looks like a shallow ditch, then a depression in the earth. But as you step closer, you realize it's part of an underground ice vault, a rare find. Almost entirely buried now, its top edge just barely visible beneath the sand like the rim of a sleeping eye. You crouch and brush some of the dust away. The earth is cooler here. You can feel it in your fingertips. There's an opening, narrow, steep. You find an old rope tied to a post nearby, and without much ceremony, you descend into the deep pit. The drop is only about 3 meters, but the temperature drops almost instantly. The light fades, replaced by a moist, earthy blackness. And the silence down here, it's the kind that presses against your chest, not menacing, just focused. You strike a match and find yourself in a compact chamber, round like the others, but much older. The walls are rougher, lined with unfired brick and packed earth. No vent shafts, no plaster. This was a precursor, a simpler yakchal built when the science was still closer to instinct than engineering, and scattered near the far end tools. Half buried in the dirt, worn down to nubs, rusted through in parts, but unmistakably functional. A long-handled ice hook bent like a shepherd's crook. A clay rake used to smooth insulation straw, and a few leather satchels, cracked and brittle now, still clinging to the memory of what they once carried. You kneel beside them and notice faint carvings on the wall's tallies. Long rows of hash marks. One wall shows 3 full seasons of ice measurements, perhaps. The other, something stranger. Small pictographs, a crescent, a fish, a tree, a hand. You trace the crescent with your thumb. Someone lived in here, or at least worked in here enough that they left their thoughts behind. You imagine the scene, a worker descending every night for weeks to store a just record. No paper. Just marks in the wall. Maybe they weren't literate in the formal sense, but they understood the cold. How to hold it, how to move it, how to respect it. Historians still debate whether these underground pits predated the domes entirely, or were just backup stepping stones in the evolution of cooling architecture. You feel strongly now that they were laboratories, places where the earliest guardians tested theories, what straw preserved best, which angles kept runoff away, how much melt could be collected before rot began. You hear a soft flutter overhead. Dust. No, a bird. A small one likely nesting in a high crevice of the collapsed ceiling. Its wings flap once, then disappear. You smile. Even here in a forgotten vault beneath the desert, something still lives. You make your way back to the rope gripping it, slowly hauling yourself up one deliberate step at a time. The heat hits you again as your head clears the rim, a sudden slap of contrast that makes you pause. You turn and look back into the opening. There's no ice left there now, but the shape remains. The memory of it. The purpose. You brush your hands off on your robe and walk on. And just as you round the next hill, you hear a voice. High-pitched, familiar, young. The cold is hiding. It's the little girl from the kitchen laughing as she tugs her younger brother by the wrist toward a patch of shaded clay wall. He resists, of course. You won't find it, he whines. It's daytime. She grins. But if you know where to look, it's still there. And then she disappears into the shadows, giggling like a snowflake in summer. You don't follow the children, but their laughter lingers in the air like a song that's already halfway forgotten. You find yourself walking toward the caravan road again, where the tracks from earlier, the ones left by Alexander's men, have mostly faded beneath a thin crust of salt and morning heat. The desert tries hard to erase things, but sometimes what it covers it also preserves. As you crest a dune, the light shifts, and for a moment your shadow stretches across the path like a banner. Below, a caravan is preparing to depart. But this isn't the usual domestic route to the village or the bazaar. These camels are packed for distance. You approach slowly, and the closer you get, the more you realize what you're seeing. Ice packed for travel, bound for the outer reaches of the empire. Not just Yazd or Shiraz, but beyond, toward the old Silk Road, toward trade posts that reach as far as the Oxus River, maybe farther. A man with sun-reddened eyes is wrapping the final layers around a sealed block. He looks up and nods. Cold to the east, he says, as if it's the most ordinary thing in the world. You pause beside one of the camels. Its back bears a woven platform covered in layers of felt, straw, clay-lined, burlap, and surprisingly charcoal dust. You blink. That one's new. Absorbs radiant heat, the man explains without prompting. Trick we borrowed from the incense traders. Found it helps with midday bursts. You run a finger across the fine black dust. It doesn't smear, it clings. Like knowledge that doesn't want to be forgotten. You glance over the caravan. Every camel is loaded precisely. Nothing is left to chance. The ice blocks are shaped into wedges narrower at one end to allow tighter bundling, reducing contact with external heat. One younger trader is running a line of cooling powder, a blend of salt ash and dried lime along the inside of the cargo lining. It smells faintly acidic. You make a mental note. These aren't just merchants, these are curators of cold. One of them notices your stare and grins. You think we just carry rocks. You shrug. I've carried, stranger. He laughs and hands you a small wax-sealed flask. Inside a sliver of ice half melted, swimming in a syrupy liquid. You uncork it and sniff tamarind and fennel. Sweet, sour, alive. You'll taste it better later, he says. After you've forgotten what cold feels like. The camel beside you snorts unimpressed. Historians still argue over how far Persian ice reached, whether it traveled hundreds of kilometers or was only used locally. But this caravan tells you otherwise. The ice here isn't just a luxury, it's a message. That it can be done. That heat doesn't always win. The lead trader checks the sun, clicks his tongue, and the caravan begins to move. Slowly. Deliberately. Like a river of shadows stitched together by ropes and good intentions. You walk beside them for a few steps, listening to the sound of straw creaking leather-groaning bells, tinkling softly on the camels' necks. Then you stop and they keep going. You watch them shrink into the distance, becoming silhouettes against the rising light. You imagine them reaching some border town weeks from now, unpacking what little cold remains, pouring a few precious drops into the hands of a boy who's never touched ice before. You imagine his face. You imagine his smile. And then you turn. You walk back toward the dome, the sun now fully above you, the wind awake again, the sky stretching farther than it has any right to. And you think cold can move, cold can travel, cold can teach, but only if someone keeps sending it forward. You take your time walking back. Not because your legs are tired, they are, but because the weight of what you just saw needs space to settle. The caravan is gone now, but the thought of it moves with you. Cold packaged into motion, woven into fabric, carried like a fragile truth. And that truth echoes louder now as you near the village again, because when something as fleeting as ice becomes worth that much trouble, it stops being just a substance. It becomes a story. You round a familiar bend and pause at the fountain square. There's an older man seated beneath a fig tree, his robe draped like a curtain over one shoulder, a scroll in his lap, and a reed pen behind his ear. You recognize the look in his eyes immediately, that deep, opinionated weariness only scholars possess. He's watching two boys argue over whether frost can form inside a sealed jar buried in sand. He waits, just long enough for the argument to peak. Then, without looking up from his scroll, he says, "It depends on the night wind." The boys groan. That's not a real answer. He lifts one eyebrow. It's the only one you'll ever get. You sit beside him without invitation. He doesn't mind. He gestures vaguely at the scroll. Writing a debate, he says, or preserving one more accurately. You glance at the top line. It's titled in Persian on the first dome. The one here, you ask. He snorts. Hardly. Everyone thinks it's the original, but there are others, older ones. Buried, broken, misremembered, some in bulk. one possibly in what's now Kandahar. Some claim the Medes had cooling pits without domes lined with bronze. He looks at you, no one agrees. Historians still argue, you offer. He smiles, always. He shifts, pulling a second scroll from his bag. Did you know the Greeks took the idea and twisted it? Called it Pygothique, their version of a cool chamber. They used marble and buried them near bathhouses. Too damp, if you ask me. You don't ask, but he continues anyway. The Romans better. They used amphorae submerged in snow pits. Still not as elegant as what the Persians managed. You nod. No wind catchers. Exactly. He points at you with his pen, pleased. Without airflow, you're just delaying the melt, not changing the conversation with the air itself. He rummages in his satchel and pulls out a folded parchment. Opens it. Inside, a map sketched in delicate red ink. Domes, vents, trade routes, ice depots. A sprawl of triangles and circles like a constellation. What is this, you ask? A theory, he says, tapping it. That the cold wasn't stored, it was migrated. That it had a rhythm. That there were circuits between cities, each passing ice like water in cupped hands. You trace the lines with your finger. The pattern is beautiful. Not precise, but persuasive. I've written 10 treatises, he says with a sigh. 3 have been banned, 2 were ignored. 1 got plagiarized by a goat herder with unusually good penmanship. You laugh, he shrugs. Truth melts slower than ice. You sit in silence for a moment, watching the boys from earlier now dragging a clay jar toward a shady patch by the bakery wall. One of them is muttering about condensation. The other is drawing lines in the dust. Do you think we'll ever know who built the first one, you ask? The scholar leans back. No, and I hope we don't. You turn to him. Because mystery is part of preservation, he says, eyes closing. If we name the builder, we start arguing over his birthplace, his politics, his shoes, and we forget the dome. He smiles faintly. Better to thank the unknown engineer who said, let's cool the desert, and then did it. You sit there beside him until the fig leaves rattle with wind, and the pen slips behind his ear again, already dry. And as you rise, he adds, if you find any domes I haven't written about, leave me a stone. You nod. The scholar's words trail behind you like incense smoke, light curling, lingering longer than they should. You walk away from the fig tree with your hands in your sleeves, your thoughts in your sandals, and a feeling that maybe, just maybe, you've been walking through history's footnotes this whole time. You take the back route past the orchard where pomegranates grow out of spite and apricots grow out of memory. The wind picks up again, and with it comes something new. Grit. At first it's just a tickle on your cheek, then it bites your ankle. And then the whole air begins to shift. You stop. The wind is wrong now. Not just hot, but chaotic. It doesn't whistle, it growls. You look up. There it is. On the horizon, a sandstorm building fast. The kind that erases cities and rewrites maps. The kind that makes even the camels stop and reconsider their choices. You turn on your heel and run, not a sprint, just a fast, stubborn march, straight toward the dome. The Yakshul looms ahead like a lighthouse made of clay. You reach it just as the first tendrils of wind whip past your ears. The air turns brown. You pull the door open, slip inside, and slam it behind you. Silence. But only inside. Outside, the wind screams like 1,000 kettles boiling at once. The dome shudders not much, but enough to make you sit down and put a hand on the wall. Just to feel that it's still here. You've always known the dome was strong, but now in this storm, you realize something more profound. It's a survivor. The sand scours the outer walls. The vents strain. The temperature shifts. But inside, the air holds its rhythm. And the ice. You check the pit. It's sweating, yes, but holding. The airflow is disrupted. The dome is adjusting. You descend quickly and begin doing what everyone before you has done in a crisis. You start reinforcing. You check the inner seals. You plug gaps with wet linen. You reposition the straw. You press your back to the wall and feel the vibration of survival. Somewhere in this mess, a brick shifts. Not dangerously. Just enough to remind you that the dome is made of intention, not invincibility. Historians rarely write about sandstorms and ice. They write about architecture trade routes, ceremonial uses. But here now, you understand something that's harder to put into books. This dome fights. It doesn't just cool, it endures. You crouch low, pulling your robe around your knees, listening to the wind claw at the vents. A bit of dust slips through the upper shaft. You catch it with a damp cloth and jam the opening tighter. You sit beside the pit arms around your knees. The air is dense now, hot above cold below. A war of layers. You stay there for what feels like an hour. And then quiet. Just like that, the wind forgets. The storm moves on. You exhale and rise. You push open the door slowly. Outside, the world is buried. The fig tree gone under a soft dune. The scholar's bench tumbled sideways, the market's awnings torn. But the dome's still standing. Still cool, still breathing. You walk the perimeter and check for cracks. There's a chip near the base. Nothing major. You'll fix it before nightfall. You look up at the sky now, washed clear again, and whisper, "Not today." And the dome, if it answers, does so with a gentle draft at your shoulder, a cool breath, saying, you spend a little time patching the chip near the base of the dome, kneeling in the sand, with your palms full of moist Sarouge the plaster mix that somehow feels both primitive and wise. As you press it into place, smoothing it in small circles, you're reminded of something Ardak once said. It's not the cracks that ruin a dome, it's the ones you don't touch. You let the words guide your hands. Even now, even after the storm, the dome needs touching. Not fixing, just acknowledgement, just presence. The sun is lower now. The storm stole half the day. You gather your things, your satchel, your bundle of cloths, your half-eaten dried fig, and begin the long, winding walk toward the next village over. Curious to see how they fared in the storm. But before you leave the valley, someone calls your name. Well, not your name exactly, just Keeper. U-turn. It's a tall boy, maybe 17, running barefoot through the sand, with a lopsided smile and a glazed ceramic jug in both hands. He stops beside you panting and holds it up like a sacred relic. For you, he says, grinning. From the North Village. We heard your dome held. You uncork the jug. Inside, something cool and red glistens. You sniff pomegranate juice with rosewater and snow. You blink. Where did you get... He shrugs. It lasted. You drink. It's cold. Real cold. Somehow, despite the sun and the distance, the snow hasn't completely melted. You taste it sharp, sweet, floral, defiant. The boy shifts beside you, unsure. They say Alexander's men tried to bring snow down the mountains once. Kept it packed in cedar bark. Said it melted anyway. You nod. Most of it. He kicks at the dirt, but this didn't. You close the jug and hand it back. Then you've done something Alexander couldn't. His eyes widen just a little. Historians still argue whether the Macedonians ever truly adopted Persian ice technology or merely admired it from the outside. Some records mention their fascination with snow in summer. Others dismiss it as exaggerated royal storytelling. But in villages like this, ice isn't a symbol, it's a practice. A survival craft, a shared inheritance. You walk with the boy for a while. He tells you about their own dome, smaller, tucked behind the olive grove. He tells you how the women covered it in soot-soaked cloth during the storm to protect the outer walls. How the vents clogged, but someone climbed up and cleared them with a broom wrapped in goat leather. You nod impressed. Then he asks the question that's clearly been on his mind the whole time. Can I see the inside of your dome? You hesitate. Not because you don't want to share, but because letting someone inside is like letting them touch your breath, your memory, your quiet. You look at him. His cheeks are still red from running. His eyes hold the right kind of reverence. You nod. You take him back. Inside, the air is cool again. Balanced. You've already cleaned up from the storm, and the pit glows faintly with the last of the light. The boy stands near the edge, peering down like he's looking into the center of the earth. He doesn't speak. He just listens. And then he asks how long will it last. You glance at the ice. Depends on the wind. He nods like he understands. Then he kneels. Places both hands gently on the floor. Not to claim it, just to feel it. You leave him there for a while. Some things can't be taught through speech. They have to be absorbed. Like cold into linen, like silence into memory. Eventually he stands, and you both walk out together. Outside, the sky has turned gold. The kind of gold that only lasts 7 minutes and never shows up on paper. The boy raises a hand. Thank you. You just smile. And as he runs off, jug swaying on his hip, you think, this is how the dome survives, not with bricks. With curiosity, with hands, with the next one in line. You stay outside for a while after the boy disappears into the hills, watching the sky turn from gold to rose to a soft, bruised violet. The heat of the day loosens its grip, and the wind returns not as a warning this time, but as a balm. It trails its fingers across your neck and slips down into the vents of the dome behind you. You hear it sigh. That same old breath. That ancient exhale. You walk the outer edge of the structure again, fingertips brushing along the familiar curve. There's a piece to this rhythm now, not urgency, just upkeep. You check the straw lining, run a hand over the sealant patches, adjust one of the outer water runoff stones that's shifted just slightly out of place. A small cluster of children plays nearby, dragging a dried palm frond through the sand like a wagon. One of them pauses to stare at you. "Are you the dome's keeper?" she asks. You consider the question, then shrug. "For now." She nods like that answer makes perfect sense and continues dragging her imaginary wagon across an imaginary road, headed toward an imaginary city. You sit on a rock and close your eyes. And then it hits you. You've seen the structure from every angle. You've walked inside it, swept it, patched it, protected it, shared it. But you've never truly seen it from above. You stand again and walk to the rear side where the slope is gentler, and footholds have been carved not recently but long ago. You climb. Slow, steady. At the top, the dome's curvature flattens just enough for you to sit without sliding off. You settle down, legs crossed, looking out. And the view is not what you expect. From above, the dome doesn't look like a house or a structure, it looks like a planet. Round, smooth, resilient. Beneath you is cold. Around you, the desert. Above you, the sky. And somewhere in between you. You trace the spiral lines of the plaster seam with your finger, feeling how each pass builds upon the last layer, after layer, season after season. This wasn't built in a rush. It was earned. You lean back and rest your shoulders against the gentle curve. The surface is warm from the sun, but you can feel the cooler layer underneath. The dome is still holding. And then a sound. Flutes. Faint. Melodic. A simple tune drifting in from the east. You sit up straighter. You see them a small procession walking slowly through the sand. White cloths, red sashes, a clay pot in each person's hands. No rush. Just purpose. You descend quickly, dusting yourself off, and meet them at the base. One of them, a woman with streaks of gray in her hair and confidence in her shoulders, steps forward and bows slightly. "We've come to return the water." You blink, then realize what she means. In her pot is melt water, collected from a nearby ice depot blessed in a spring ceremony, and brought back here not to drink, not to store, but to pour back into the earth around the dome. You watch as each person in the procession approaches. Quietly, with reverence, pouring their small pot's contents at the base of the structure. A symbolic cycle. Water that cooled, water that melted, water that returns. No one speaks. Not because it's forbidden, but because it's unnecessary. The final person, a boy about 10, pours his pot too quickly, spills a little on his feet, and laughs. The group smiles. Even rituals can afford small mistakes. After the last drop is given, the woman turns to you. It reminds the dome that the cold it gave didn't disappear. It became part of us. You nod. It's the most logical thing you've heard all day. They bow once more. Then turn and walk back the way they came, flutes resuming melody, weaving gently between footsteps. You sit again near the base, the sand now darker where the water soaked in. You run your hand across it. It feels cool. And you wonder, how many drops have touched this ground? How many people have returned what was given? How many domes stood witness to these quiet, sacred exchanges between climate and care? You don't need answers. Just the knowing that you're now part of it, too. You stay seated beside the dome long after the flutes have faded, tracing the edge of the dampened earth with the side of your thumb. The water has already begun to vanish, lifted skyward by the desert's patience. But you know it's still here somewhere, folded into the dust. Somewhere behind you, the Yakchal breathes out another slow sigh. You stand stretch and feel the pull in your shoulders, not just from walking or sweeping or watching over vents, but from carrying meaning. You didn't build the dome, but now it lives a little in your body too. Your feet take you almost without permission toward the far edge of the village where stone turns to gravel, and gravel fades to sand. There's a solitary post set in the ground there, carved with faded script. Not a marker, a notice. It's where people post questions. Today there's only one. Scribbled in charcoal on rough parchment pinned with a reed, the handwriting is young, unsure of itself. Why do we keep the cold when it always disappears? You smile. You take a stick. Write an answer in the sand just below it. Because it teaches us how to stay. And then you walk on, past a half-finished shelter. Past a cluster of goats arguing with a cactus. Past a woman rolling a pastry sheet flat against a stone warmed just enough by the sun to crisp it but not burn it. And then you find it. The clay schoolhouse tucked behind a row of date palms that no one waters but somehow survive. Inside it's dim. A few shelves line the walls, heavy with scrolls and carved tablets. Clay models of domes sit on a low bench, each one cracked in exactly the right places to show the inner workings where the vents meet the chamber. How the walls hold airflow. How the pits are shaped to guide meltwater like a whispered secret. And in the corner, a tall jar filled with fragments. Not ice, not straw, but mistakes. Broken models, overbaked clay, misaligned vent pieces, shards of effort. A sign above it reads in Persian, "Everything that didn't work helped us find what did." You feel that line settle behind your ribs. A voice cuts through the stillness. They say the first dome was a mistake. You turn. A teacher leans in the doorway, arms crossed, not unkind. Some say it was meant to be a bathhouse. Others say it was a place to store dry grain. But the air kept changing inside. It got cold. So they changed with it. You nod. "Isn't that what we all are?" she asks. Something built for one purpose and used for another. She walks over to a bench and picks up a scroll. Hands it to you. It's a child's drawing a yakchal shaped like a watermelon vent drawn as spiraling feathers. Beside it, stick figure camels with ice cubes for humps. A sun with a frown. A cloud holding a little umbrella over the dome. You laugh. She grins. That one won't win the engineer's prize, but it might explain everything better than I ever could. You carefully roll it up. "May I keep it?" She waves her hand. Knowledge shouldn't be jealous. You leave the school with the scroll tucked under your arm and the thought still echoing. Something built for one purpose and used for another. Like cold in a desert, like silence in a city, like you. As you walk back, the dome appears again familiar now, not just as a structure, but as a character. You know its sounds, its pace, its rhythm. You could draw its vents with your eyes closed. And as the light bends golden again and the heat begins to drift from the ground, you realize you've stopped visiting the dome. You've started belonging to it. The wind picks up gently as you approach the dome one last time, brushing fine lines into the sand like a scribe writing without ink. You step inside and the cool wraps around you familiar now, not a surprise, not a miracle, just a presence. You descend toward the pit again, slower this time, your feet trusting the worn steps, your fingers grazing the curved walls. The ice is lower now. The melt is happening, but it's not loss. It's the price of function. You sit on the ledge again. For the last time, maybe. This time you don't take notes. You don't patch a crack. You don't clean. You just sit and listen. The drip of meltwater. The hush of the vents. The breath of a building that has never stopped breathing. You pull out the scroll from the child at the school. Unroll it. Look again at the frowning sun. The feathered vents. The umbrella cloud. It's absurd. Beautiful. A little true. The kind of thing that could only be drawn by someone who hasn't yet learned to fear being wrong. You lean it gently against the wall beside you so it watches the ice too. A quiet ritual, an offering of understanding. Above you, light filters through the vent at the top. Not directly, the dome knows better. The rays bend softly across the walls in shifting arcs. The dome is still working, still holding back the heat, still teaching even in silence. And maybe that's the final truth the dome has to offer. Cold is not permanence, cold is patience. And patience is a kind of power. You close your eyes, letting the hush fill you. And in this final moment, you don't need history books or scrolls or even the scholar's map. You don't need Ardak's math or the trader's roots. You don't even need the dome itself. Because the cold is in you now. Not in your skin, not in your bones, in your breath. And that's where it will stay. Went down 300 words. So now we leave the dome behind. Let the ice continue its slow work drip by drip beneath a ceiling of stars and straw. Let the wind slip quietly through the vents again, brushing past memory, past brick and lime, past silence. Let it breathe without you for a while. You've seen what needed seeing. You've touched the plaster, smelled the ash, heard the hum of still air. You've carried water, tended cold, watched heat try and fail to win. So let that lesson stay with you, that even in the hottest places, there can be stillness. That even when everything says melt, something can hold. That endurance doesn't have to roar, it can whisper, it can drip. You rest now in a dome older than forgetting, built by hands that didn't care if they were remembered, only that the cold stayed just a little longer. So take one last breath. Let it fill your lungs like morning fog in a desert valley. Let it wrap around you like linen dampened in rose water. Let it cool the parts of you that run too hot too fast. And sleep, because there's nothing more to guard tonight. The dome will breathe without you, the ice will hold, and the wind will carry your dreams back to the beginning. End of script. Sweet dreams.